When you play the Game of Thrones,
Subscribe and like.
you die. There is no middle ground.
Welcome back to the Grease Goblins YouTube channel. Today's video, we're going to be exploring, can Daenerys actually have children going forward in the future with the Winds of Winter or a Dream of Spring? Now, I find this topic very interesting to talk about because in the show, they kind of teased and danced around this idea of Daenerys having children. And kind of the book has done the same thing, but not to the same extent as what the show went, where characters are openly questioning Mirri Maz Duur's prophecy to Daenerys, like Jon in season 7 when they get together. I should say right before they get together. So where does this idea come from? Why does Daenerys believe that she is barren and all of that? So let's read off that quote. Let's talk about it. And then let's see if that quote actually holds any validity to Daenerys having children. Mirri Maz Duur says this: "When the sun rises in the west and sets in the east," said Mirri Maz Duur, "when the seas go dry and mountains blow and the wind like leaves, when your womb quickens again and you bear a living child, then he will return and not before." This was referring to Khal Drogo and him becoming a vegetable state and all the things that happened in book 1. And so basically Mirri Maz Duur equates all these impossibilities that we believe can't happen to her having children again. So Daenerys kind of takes this as fact because Mirri does seem to have magical skills. She would know about these things. She's delivered children before. So Daenerys takes this at point blank value. But the thing that Daenerys does and constantly does throughout the entire series is that Daenerys is somebody that trusts women, especially like mother or older type of women characters, way more than she should. Book 1 is almost all about that with Mirri Maz Duur. Mirri Maz Duur has every reason to betray Daenerys and to do all these things against Daenerys, and Daenerys doesn't even see that coming. And even here, Daenerys takes the word of Mirri Maz Duur and doesn't really question it. So what does that mean for us as the audience? Should we believe Mirri Maz Duur? Yes, Mirri Maz Duur is a credible source in terms of knowing about those things, but can she be trusted? She's lied to Daenerys a couple times now and has betrayed her. Mirri Maz Duur herself leads Daenerys kind of down a road where Daenerys basically loses her child and Drogo because of Mirri. Now, I will say Drogo's downfall and his infection, I feel like was more Drogo's own fault. But in terms of what becomes of Drogo being a vegetable kind of state and losing her child, that is purely because of Mirri. So I want to say right off the bat, I don't trust Mirri Maz Duur as a source. I don't think as an audience we should. Now, maybe we should take what she says with a grain of salt, right? We should question it. When we get to the last Daenerys chapter of the book and of the series up to this point, we get something that happens that's very interesting. We know Daenerys has been sexually active since book 1, especially with Daario and even his Dar, so we don't necessarily know whose kid she possibly could have been carrying at the end of A Dance with Dragons, because it would be heavily implied that at the end of Dance with Dragons, she has a miscarriage. Again, it really doesn't matter who got her pregnant, if it was Daario, if it was his Dar, but the point is, she somehow got pregnant. That would infer that she's not barren. She can have kids. Now, maybe they don't turn out great, or she has issues with delivering those. That's a common Targaryen thing. The Targaryens struggle at times with having children. And so when we go to A Dance with Dragons, and I'll kind of pull up some information just to tell you why I think that Daenerys did have a miscarriage. This is something that I didn't pick up on. I was talking about this idea with Stream a couple weeks ago at this point, and they brought this up to me. I, for some reason, never really interpreted what Daenerys was going through. I thought she was just going through a sickness of drinking probably bad water and also being sick and not eating food or proper food in weeks. But I've kind of definitely come along the idea that yes, Daenerys has a miscarriage at the end of A Dance with Dragons. So let's look at that information and you guys can decide for yourselves. When she wakes at dawn, she is bleeding from her vagina. She tries to convince herself it's only her period, which she realizes has skipped for a few months. But the blood flow is unusually heavy, and it's not the time of month she usually bleeds. It's not a period, it seems to be a miscarriage. So I think this is really important because, again, I'm not a woman. I'm not a doctor. I don't know all about this kind of stuff. But again, when you do get pregnant, your periods start to stop because obviously you're pregnant, right? And so that is right away really interesting because you think about how young Daenerys is. For that to just stop is unusual. The amount of blood flow that she's having is extremely unusual by her own account. And also, you think about the dream and the visions that she has prior to that. It all leads to this situation where Daenerys wakes up in this really weird state. And maybe her, like some audience members, think that this isn't actually a miscarriage, but all the signs show that this probably was a miscarriage. So we now have established that at least at the very bare minimum, Daenerys can get pregnant. But does that mean she can have a fully healthy child? Who knows, right? The Targaryens have really bad genes because of the incest that's been going on with them. So if you want to go with the idea that, again, what we are told in the story is that she is the daughter of Rhaella and Aerys Targaryen. Both of them were Targaryens. A lot of incest. If you want to go with other theories, I know some people believe that Daenerys was the child of like Rhaegar, for instance, then this might be a little different. But in terms of her parentage and her family, a lot of incest causes a lot of reproductive issues. Think about Maegor. He couldn't have kids, it seems like. Aegon the Conqueror. He was somebody that I also believe struggled to have children. Now, he did eventually have some, if allegedly Maegor and Aenys are his kids. He still had issues with having children, it would appear. And you can go all the way down the list with the Targaryens. There's numerous points where people have issues having children. We think about, for instance, Rhaenyra. She loses a child in childbirth, even though she does have a lot of children. It's just something the Targaryens deal with quite a lot. And so I think this was more Mirri Maz Duur trying to once again manipulate a young girl in Daenerys in book 1. And Daenerys believes it because she is so young and she is looking towards having a mother or a grandmother type figure because those figures were not present in her life. She's never had that. You even think about the person that was really in charge of her growing up, which would have been Willem Darry and then her brother. She's never really had a mother figure. She's never really had that type of support system that a young girl should have. And so I personally think that Daenerys can, yes, get pregnant. It's for her to see that, right? And she has not realized that she had a miscarriage. The hallucinations, she's got other things going on in her mind that I think are deterring her from realizing that. But I do think that Daenerys will realize at some point she can have children. So that kind of leaves us on an interesting point. If Daenerys does get married once again, which I think is likely, I don't think her and Hizdahr will be a thing. Hizdahr is a weird one because he's kind of an obstacle for Daenerys at this point. Daenerys is going to be going west to Westeros at some point, and I think Hizdahr, one of two things is going to happen with him. Either one, he's going to die, so that frees up Daenerys to wed again, or the two will basically get divorced. We'll see how that actually plays out. But I think that Daenerys, there's a possibility that she has a second child, but she loses that child in a miscarriage once again. Again, there's a lot of parallels that we see with the Dance of the Dragons that George is kind of trying to bring out. He's already stated we're going to see a Dance of the Dragons a second time. What if we see another parallel that Daenerys has another child but loses her just like Rhaenyra does right before the beginning of the dance when she learns of her father's death and the usurping of her crown? I think it's an interesting idea, and if you want to talk about Daenerys becoming somebody that's maybe a bit more on the crueler side, or she's someone that becomes a bit more emotional and like mad the way the Targaryens are, things like that will definitely get that ball rolling. Daenerys realizes she's already lost one child. She has a second child and loses again another one in childbirth, whether that's to whoever she ends up hooking up with, if it's still Dario, which I highly doubt. That could be a huge motivator for her as a character and could start to change her as a person. Something I really wish that House of the Dragon had done in its first 2 seasons is establishing the Rhaenyra of the book where she is a bit more fiery. She is somebody with a temper. She is somebody that acts kind of impulsively, and they really took away and they stripped Rhaenyra of a lot of those, negative qualities that makes her so compelling to me as a character. I think all those things are set up for Daenerys when we talk about her, either whether it's in a video in previous weeks about her and young Riff, and the perspective that I think a lot of people will have towards her coming over to Westeros. And you add on things that she'll probably be dealing with in a personal way as well, like having a child. So let me know what you guys all think about Daenerys having more children, or if she can even have children, and I'll see you guys all in the next one. Bye, guys.